So why is all this important? There's been a lot of regulatory action and sharpening focus at by both the FTC and the CFPB over the last few years in particular. The FTC has taken a number of enforcement actions that have been pretty well publicized. They're typically around people doing really bad things. It's not typical somebody made a mistake or forgot a light disclosure. But they have gone through and released several publications really targeted at the online industry to help us collectively get better at making FTC disclosures not misleading consumers, kind of all those good things. They have also said that they're not going out and looking at bloggers and specifically trying to catch them in the act, that they follow consumer complaints effectively. So the educational work that they're doing may help us all collectively get better about what we do on the web. At the same time, it also may raise consumer awareness, and that may drive additional regulatory work. The CFPB, a recently formed agency, or I guess not recently formed, but it's really beginning to show that it has real teeth. They've collected over $10 billion on behalf of consumers in both a mix of refunds and fines over the last, I guess, since their existence. And this was as of like mid-summer. And they've won judgments against basically all of the major card issuers in the US. Now, these numbers aren't really associated with performance marketing per se. I think with most of the credit card companies, the types of concerns that have resulted in big judgments revolved around add-on products and how they're marketed and sold, things like credit monitoring, credit insurance, stuff like that. But the general point is there's very real teeth that they have and are flexing when they see when they see things going awry. So we want to talk a bit about how to mitigate the risk of enforcement actions, which is just below the screen. So how can I help in this journey? So I chair the PMA Compliance Council. We've put out a number of white papers on particularly talking about bloggers and the FTC disclosures. And then with my current company, BrandVerity, we've worked with a number of major issuers, their affiliate networks, and even their affiliates to help, and have helped them through, at this point, it seems like it's actually hundreds of card updates. So we're very familiar with the credit card compliance process. I think even lawyers give this disclosure. This isn't legal advice, but I'm not a counsel, I'm not a lawyer. You'll have somebody probably in-house that or out-of-house you'd want to work with directly. So generally speaking, I tend to think about compliance along three principal tiers. The first is policy, and this is reflected almost primarily through your affiliate agreement. The second is process. The third is technology. I'm not going to spend too much time on policy, just to say that there's a great document that we put together at the PMA around affiliate agreements, and it walks you through the set of things you should be thinking about in your agreements, what types of things you should require, what other things to consider. There's a lot of depth there. I've done entire presentations entirely on the affiliate agreement. We're not going to go deeply at all. Actually, we're not going to touch it beyond what we say here. We're going to spend the bulk of the time on process, because I think that's where a lot of organizations are starting to figure out what they need to do to really ensure compliance and sort of stay on the right side of all the regulatory actions that they're doing. And we'll touch super lightly on technology. And it's sort of unusual, I think, to be a technology solutions provider and sort of saying technology maybe, because we've seen a number of organizations that have operated without technology, running entirely manual processes that have just got it really well dialed. But technology can be an interesting enabler, and we'll talk through a few different solutions that you can use to help improve the work that you do. So I'm going to start with some of a brief overview of the things the FTC cares about. We're going to touch on what the CFP cares about, and then going through some of like the audit processes and so on. For all of the writing that's out there about what the FTC does and what they're looking for, I think it summarizes really simply into this one slide. The FTC doesn't want consumers misled, and they define deceptive acts of a significant minority, and there's varying definitions of significant minority, of consumers are misled by a web page, a tweet, a post, something along those lines. At the end of the day, the guidance that they've really seemed to have gelled on, an affiliate is, sort of said right here, when an affiliate is writing about a product or service, they need to make sure that the disclosure is in the main body of the post before anything that might distract the consumer, take them away, like a link, it needs to be above the fold, maybe you don't want an ad to take them away. It's not sufficient to put in the sidebar and the footnote in the menu, on a page off-site, and then terms and conditions. All of those things, they're taking the position that users or consumers that are viewing that might not read it and might be deceived based upon on the post. Similarly, the thing that's visible on the desktop has to be similarly visible on mobile devices as well. The guidance that they've seemed to have really settled on for social media, hashtag ad, and they're suggesting that it should be in the main body of the tweet before the link, because it might get missed after the link. So relatively simple guidance. It can be relatively easy to follow, and it also can go seriously awry. Now, if you're working with a product where there's testimonials or there are specific product claims, those of course have to be accurate. They have to reflect what a reasonable consumer would experience when working with it. But for most of the general product review type stuff, I think this summarizes it really well. So the CFPB, so I'm most familiar with credit cards, and that's what I'll kind of talk about. It definitely applies in industries outside of credit cards, elsewhere in consumer finance. So one of the first things that we've seen people do and do consistently is they run independent processes for editorial marketplace sites. The two groups of sites come with their own unique challenges, and to some extent require differing degrees of review and differing degrees of assurances as you go through it. Obviously, you're looking for correct and accurate details. Things like the rates and the terms, card images. Is the card image that is associated with a particular offer accurately associated with that offer? Is it actually for a different card or an expired image? Landing page, card categorization. You don't want to have a card promoted in a rewards category if it's not a rewards category, or low credit category if it's not actually a card for low credit people. We've seen increased focus on consumer comments. I think initially a few years ago, there was, I would say, a lot of question marks around to what extent consumer comments on an affiliate's website about a credit card, to what extent the issuer and the marketing chain on down was responsible for looking at it. And increasingly, it seems like the issuers have decided that they care about the comments. And it's not so much about but it tends to be a higher level of issues. So the APRs, credit guarantees, users relaying statements about what they, giving advice to other users. And typically the issuers are requiring that their affiliates either modify or remove comments that may be problematic from the content that might be static or might not last throughout. The great news, I think, from all of this is that, at least in the credit card space, the vast majority of the errors seem to be accidental. There's not a whole lot of deception, that outright deception that we're finding in this space. The flip side of the outright, of the accidental, is really that you're trying to catch their mistakes. So, I mean, you guys have probably been out in the hall. Some of the affiliates out there can't even find their shoes. There's a pretty good chance that they might miss a rate update or a particular disclosure that you require on the page. So you have to be basically more thorough than they can be. There's, I think, a big component of the compliance process is recognizing that you don't necessarily know about all the places where affiliates are promoting you. There's the sites that you know about, and those are typically what the affiliates put in their application. It's what they would have maybe publicized, or what you know about. Those are the places that you're visiting. But in reality, ideally these two circles are pretty much the same, but the reality is that the affiliate sites that do promote you sometimes are more than just the ones that you know about or were told about. And that can happen due to things like sub-affiliate networks. It can happen due to promote test sites that they're running. So they have like a test server that they run, and it somehow gets exposed to the public, and now there's two versions of the site out there. It can happen due to content scrapers that keep the affiliate links intact. And unfortunately, when your affiliate link gets scraped and put on someone else's site, it's still your responsibility to deal with that content in one way, shape, or the other. And it can just be that they happen to have other sites that they didn't think to put in the profile or update you about. So part of the work of the process is not just going through the sites you know about, but trying to figure out what you don't know about. So in the audit process, from an FTC perspective, there seems to be a pretty crystallized process for what to expect. So who here is familiar with legacy learning and the FTC settlement? Okay, great. So about 3 or 4 years ago, legacy learning settled with the FTC for inappropriate marketing of their programs. So they run a series of, I think they're DVDs that teach you how to play the piano, how to learn the guitar, and so on. And the FTC found legacy learning affiliates doing 2 particularly pernicious things. They were posting reviews of the DVDs and making claims, I learned how to play the guitar in 30 days or whatever, without ever actually having, they're basically manufactured testimonials, so they weren't real, and there was no disclosure that they were being paid for the work. So they settled with the FTC, settled with legacy learning, legacy learning settled with the FTC, and they required that legacy learning engage in an audit process, which is probably very similar to the audit processes that a lot of organizations now are starting to think about running for FTC compliance or for CFPB compliance. And it requires them to do a monthly review of their top 50 affiliates by revenue, and then select another 50 affiliates and randomly from the long tail and do a review of those sites, and they have to do that monthly. So if you're thinking about setting up a process and audit process around an affiliate program for FTC compliance, something like this is probably going to look pretty good from the FTC's perspective. I mean, presuming that you're finding the errors and going through the remediation process with the affiliate and getting those things either changed or taken down or whatever the case might be. Now, people who are dealing with CFPB compliance aren't so lucky. There's no sampling typically. There's no top affiliates. Typically, the expectations from the CFPB on down revolve around full compliance. That means every site, every URL where an offer is running, where there's a commissionable link, where there's a review by affiliate, is expected to be compliant from their perspective. And so typically, we see 2 processes being used. I think one is regular full reviews. When it's done manually, there's usually a big spreadsheet, lots and lots of rows, and a team of people. They're going through the individual URLs and checking them out specifically. And then there's typically a set of periodic reviews driven by changes in offer updates. So it's new card, new rates. The rates just went up. The federal funds rate went up, so almost all the cards are going through a round now of adjusting the rates. That means a full review of everything related to that card. Typically, the issuers look for super quick turnaround times. We're sort of seeing either situations where the affiliates are being required to show the issuer, the network, or the agency a page with the correct terms and conditions on a test server before it ever goes live in advance of the anticipated change. And then there's usually sort of like a 24-hour window for them to get everything correct. And there's a heavy round of iteration kind of to pull that off. All right. So I think we're frozen on this slide. I'll talk you through the rest of the slides, though. So as you sort of work through these processes, there's typically, I think with both of them, there's a pretty high burden around sort of proof in process. And what they're typically looking for are proof that you trained your team for the process. So you got to have a set of training materials. If for some reason the team that's meant to do the process called in sick today, left your company, it needs to be reproducible. You need to be able to hire new people, fill them in, get them to do the work again. They're, I think, very clear around the training documentation and of the marketing team as well. So there's the training. Following the training, there's full-on documentation of, there's a requirement around full-on documentation of the process. So these are the sites I reviewed. I did on this time and date. It was done by this person. They found one issue, no issue, an issue of this type, and then documentation around the actual remediation process. So we contacted affiliate such and such at a certain time. Affiliate said they were going to do X, or they're going to do Y. They did. We confirmed it. case was closed, or they didn't do it, we had to turn off the link or do something like that. There's a suite of tools that we've seen people utilize as part of their process that I think can be quite enabling. In the first category of things of trying to find the sites that you don't know about or you haven't learned about yet, there's a number of great tools like Moz.com, SEO Majestic that look at backlinks, so you can see who's linking to. Ideally, it's a specific URLs, a conversion URLs out on the web. SimilarWeb has some great data that can be used to help fill in the sort of like how else are users getting to my offer landing pages. 5IQ is an affiliate intelligence service. They provide really good data around your affiliate network that you might not otherwise know about. These can all be really good resources to help you start to sort of piece in the picture of the sites that you don't know about. Similarly, once you're going through and looking for sort of compliance checks, you can take terms, trigger terms, maybe it's like the old rate on a card, or it's credit guaranteed or something like that, and do a bunch of Google searches. Take those terms, put them into Google, along with the site that you're intending to review, and see if those terms appear on any pages with your brand or with that might require you to dig in and look further. Similarly, as you go through and conduct the audit process, I think most affiliate programs these days are using a CRM of some sort or another, but you want all of this running through your CRM. You want the documentation of the email sent, the documentation of the responses. You want to be able to track history of exactly how affiliates responded, how often they had issues, and like when the process was run. And I think we see people having pieced together a bunch of those tools in a way to make a more comprehensive process. And then, of course, there are sort of more full-service solutions that help sort of do all that on behalf of the affiliate, or on behalf of either the issuer or the manager or so on. So there's a bunch of resources that I can't show you now that are sort of fit the learn more category. Those are in the slides that'll be available after the show, or I can email you a copy or afterwards if you want to drop off a card. And I think that's most of the content I was hoping to cover. Does anybody have any questions? Useful, not useful? Yeah, useful? Okay, cool. Please, there's a little sheet in front of you. Please fill it out and return it back in. I get that feedback. That helps me sort of figure out what topics are interesting. Affiliate Summit gets that feedback as well, and that helps prioritize content and so on. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time.